Hey Stephen, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, yes.
You grew up in Hempstead, is that correct?
I did.
And what was it like?
Well, Hempstead is what they call a new town. It was a post-war development designed, for a brave new world of living in the suburbs. And essentially it's become part of London. I mean, it's outside London, but only just. So it's like living in the suburbs of a major city. But that, of course, is very different to living within the city itself. One of the things, I mean, I've moved back there now, so the reason I'm talking about it in the present tense is because I still live in Hempstead, but I spent a long time living in the heart of London. And moving back to Hempstead is like almost moving back to a place where there are the ghosts of my childhood. So every street corner, every street, every park, every tree, has a kind of nostalgic memory for me, which has been quite nice, actually, quite pleasant actually.
And is it the atmosphere? Is it a close community, or are the people very much to themselves?
It's kind of a bit of it's a bit of both. It's not like a little village where everyone knows everyone, but it's certainly a very different way of living to the way I was used to when I was living in London. And of course, this all kind of taps into the subject of the album. The album is about life in the heart of the metropolis, and life in the heart of the city for me was very isolating and very disconnected from other people. So, I mean, all the time I was living in the city, I never really knew my neighbours. I never knew their names. I didn't know what they did for a living, and they didn't know what I did for a living. When you move to a smaller town like Hempstead, it's certainly a lot more of a community feeling. I know all the people in my street, I know the name of my postman, I know the name of the local policeman. So it's kind of a surprise and a shock in a way to get back to a way of life where you do have this sense of community. And it did put my time in London much more into perspective. And of course that's what this album ultimately became about, the life of a young woman living in the city and effectively disappearing, almost erasing herself. So I think moving back to my hometown definitely gave me a very different perspective on life in the city.
Yes, because the album is based on the story of Joyce Carol Vincent.
Right.
But could you imagine this kind of thing happening in the place where you live now?
No, it wouldn't. I mean, I think that's the whole thing. It would not happen in a smaller community because everyone is very much aware of everyone else. And the whole story about Joyce Carol Vincent, of course, is that she was dead in her apartment for more than 2 years. And even her friends, the people that she knew, even her family and friends, didn't question it. And that certainly wouldn't happen. I don't believe it would happen in a smaller community where neighbours are always dropping in on each other, which is what happens, in smaller communities. It simply does not happen in the city, at least in my experience.
And what touched you about the case of Joyce Vincent?
I think she, for me, became a symbol. I mean, of course, the story itself is extraordinary and very sad. The idea that you could be an attractive young woman, because that's the thing, she was not a little lonely old lady, which I think a lot of people, when they hear that story, they immediately make the assumption she's a lonely old lady. And she was nothing like that. She was an attractive young woman who had friends and family. But the point is that she chose to disappear. She chose to make herself isolated. And that itself, for me, is something I can almost relate to, and I think we all can, that kind of feeling of not wanting to go out into this crazy world of technology and terrorism and conflict and confusion and war and noise and bullshit. And I totally understand that impulse to just say, no, I'm going to curl up in my little cocoon and I'm just going to watch the world from outside, and I'm going to watch the world through my TV and my internet portal. I don't need to go out into this crazy world. And I think everyone can kind of relate to that. And for me, so she became a symbol of what it means to be living in the 21st century, in the age of the internet, in the virtual world, in the age of social networking. And so it began to, for me, it began to spiral off into all these other subjects that I wanted to talk about, like the internet, like social networking, like, you know, a certain nostalgia for your childhood, which comes back to what I was talking about, moving back to my hometown. I think everyone, as they get older, begins to have more and more nostalgia for a time in their life when probably you couldn't wait to grow up. You know, I couldn't wait to be grown up. But now I look back at my childhood and I understand it was a time of, you know, freshness, naivety, of wonder. And I think a character like Joyce Carol Vincent, or a character that's based on her, because my character is not Joyce Carol Vincent, but she's a character very much based on her. A character like that would find the modern world as an adult would view it with quite a lot of disillusionment. And I can totally relate to that.
But you mentioned the internet and the social media, but you also made a website for the album. So what was the reasoning? How does that fit in?
Because that's exactly what the character would do and would have done. You know, and so, listen, I'm not saying that the internet is a bad thing. For me, the internet is a wonderful thing. Technology is only as good as the way people choose to use it. Now, the problem we have is we have wonderful technology, we have the internet, we have cell phones, we have the TV, and all of those things are incredible inventions and have the potential to be incredible portals of knowledge and information and to bring people closer together. But in fact, the problem is the way human beings are, not the way the technology is. Most human beings use the internet for downloading music, pornography, music, and talking bullshit on Twitter and Facebook. Twitter and Facebook. So much information on the internet is just noise. It's just people talking crap to each other. And there's no real sense of insight or intellect, it seems to me, in a lot of that stuff. So the problem is not the technology. The problem is the way human beings relate to that technology. And it's always been that way. It's always been that way. I think human beings by nature are quite passive. We're quite passive. If we're given technology that enables us to be really lazy, we'll be really lazy. Unfortunately, and you have to kind of push yourself to find creative ways of using technology. So listen, I love the internet. For me, as a musician, it's a fantastic way to get my music out there. But at the same time, you won't find me on Facebook. I don't have my own Facebook page. I have a fan page, which is great, get information out. You won't find me on Facebook talking about what I had for breakfast or telling my fans, hey, I'm doing my shopping in Sainsbury's. But a lot of people do that. I don't want to know that. I don't need to know that, you know. So that's the downside for me of the internet.
But then what made you put up a page with diary-like posts for the character of your album?
Because I think that this is a great way. Listen, this is a character who has no interaction with other human beings. So the only way to tell her story, really, is through her own thoughts, her own internal thoughts, and the way she documents those thoughts. So it starts out with a diary, a teenage diary, and it ends with this online blog. Now, of course, it may be that in her mind, no one is reading the blog, but it becomes almost like an internal dialogue. It becomes almost like an equivalent to a teenager's diary, documenting dreams, documenting observations, documenting experiences, documenting thoughts. It seemed to me the perfect way to tell the story of somebody that otherwise has no interaction.
And I also read that the artwork, I haven't seen it, but it also relates to the story. How does it fit in?
Okay, in the story my character is a painter, so she does have a very strong connection to the visual world through photography, through illustration, and through the various the artwork. Certainly the special edition, the special version of the artwork has almost like a scrapbook type of feel with various documents, as well as the photography and as well as the illustration, various documents relating to her life. So a birth certificate, postcard, letter, newspaper cutting, Polaroid photographs. And a lot of these things are loose inserts. They're not printed on the page, they are actually reproduced to look authentic, which I think is quite a unique way to present an album. I've not seen anyone do that. Certainly in the music, I've seen it done in the literary world, but in the music world, to create a document like that of a whole life through not just the printed book, but also through these other artifacts. Her diary, we've created her diary as a 13-year-old teenager, and actually reproduced it as a diary on the right kind of paper and written in hand. So it's going to be a really beautiful thing, I think, and it will tell you a lot more. It will feel very authentic, hopefully. It'll tell you a lot more about this woman and how she arrives at this point.
And I also read that in a way you use autobiographical passages.
Right.
Do you have an example?
All of it. I mean, okay. To explain that, I believe that anyone that creates a fictional character, in order to make that fictional character believable, that people really can believe this character exists, is actually to implant your own autobiography into that character, your own. And for me, the best analogy I can think of is in the movie Blade Runner. There are the replicants. You know the movie Blade Runner? Okay. Do you know the movie Blade Runner?
I do.
Okay, good. The movie Blade Runner, there are these sort of simulations of human beings called replicants. But in order to make the replicants actually authentic and believable, the person who creates them implants their own memories into the replicant. So the replicant thinks that they are actually things that happen to them. They actually believe they are human beings and they believe they have this past, but this past actually has come from the creator. So in a way, that's a good analogy for me between creating a character and investing it with your own thoughts, your own experiences. So actually almost everything that happens to my character and some of the dreams and some of the thoughts she has, most of them are mine, really. And in that sense, you could say that any character that anybody creates is just a reflection or a facet of themselves, because you have to make it believable. So a lot of the experiences of this woman are actually my experiences of living in the city, my experiences of being a child. You know, some of the images are taken directly from my own childhood.
Do you have a specific example?
Well, there's a song on the album called Perfect Life, and Perfect Life has a line in it where the character is talking in the first person, and she says, this is just a very poetic example, but she says, sometimes we would go down to Blackbird's Moor in the twilight and watch the barges on Grand Union. Now that might not mean anything to you, but Blackbird's Moor is a park near to where I grew up. The Grand Union is a canal that ran through my town, and the barges were the boats that used to pass along the Grand Union Canal. And I absolutely remember as a child going down to the park on a beautiful summer evening and with my friend and watching the barges go past on the canal. So that is a very vivid but real image from my childhood, and I gave it to my character.